let's talk about class balancing changes first. I think that's the most important thing to talk about first. They're removing a lot of skill tags and making it more generic. What I mean by that is before a passive may only affect mastery skills, and now it's going to affect all skills. Before, it may only affect core skills, and now it will affect a wide range of skills, right? And for example, a detailed one they listed exactly is sorcerer mastery skills will now be listed as core skills as well. So anything that affects core will affect all those skills. In general, that means builds will be way more free and flowing and interesting, and passives can be used for more abilities than just one at a time. It should let skills that aren't core skills be more of the main damage source of skills. A lot of interesting things from that. The next big thing about the campfire was the itemization changes. Basically, they're cutting down how much loot drops massively and making it so it's pretty easy off the bat to know what items you do want to pick up, and they're making it so affixes are just better overall. They're getting rid of the weird damage on Wednesday before Tuesday afternoon behind back stuff, right? It's just generic damn now. It's you got like stuff like crit chance, crit check damage, attack speed, primary stat, you got all damn, vulnerability damn, crit, that kind of stuff. Very straightforward affixes that basically everyone wants to use. So stuff on the ground should be much more easier to read. On top of that, there's just 3 affixes now, but those affixes are much stronger. What they're doing instead, since the loot on the ground is more generic and good for most builds, they're giving us a new crafting system called tempering that will allow us to add the interesting class-specific affixes onto the gear. For example, there's one where bone splinter will split out more shards, one that reduces the cooldown on charge, right? Basically, the loot on the ground will be less often, but when you pick it up, it will be good quality and pretty useful for classes of base level. And then you will customize that to have the affixes you actually care about for your build. So on top of that, they're adding a new drop system called greater affixes, and this is essentially every time an item drops at the highest level, which is 95 level monsters and above, which is 925 ancestral legendaries, they will have a chance to become greater affixes, which is a 1.5 times roar multiplier. So basically, you still get that big dopamine hit of looking for loot on the ground. It's just going to be way more easier for you to tell because there's going to be a symbol on the loot. Hopefully, they add a highlighter color to it, but for now, it's a symbol. Let you know that that specific legendary has a huge greater roll on it, and that's a dopamine hit we're going for now. It should make essentially a much more stricter loot filter in the base game, where you can easily sift through the stuff on the ground, know what's not worth picking up, and know what is worth picking up, and still get the dopamine hit. That's the goal, at least. I think it sounds good. I still would like a loot filter. I still want some way to highlight affixes I actually care about, but in general, it should be much more interesting and much more easier to go through loot, and then you can customize pieces still to make more builds. Honestly, the affix system will be way more interesting with the crafting system they just talked about, because as of right now, the affixes are pretty boring for builds, and now there's going to be an actual use for these affixes, hopefully. On top of that, they're adding a new endgame system called the Pit, which is greater rifts. If you play Diablo 3, you know what greater rifts are. You know how it works. If you didn't, basically it's an endgame system where it starts at level 100 at tier 1, you go to tier 2, the higher level monsters, and it keeps going seemingly infinitely. But doing this content rewards a new currency that goes into the new upgrade system called Masterworking. Masterworking is replacing the typical blacksmithing 1 to 5 boring stuff, and adding a system where when you masterwork an item from 1 to 12, you get 5% more affix stacks per one, right? So it goes from 100 HP to 105 HP, right, every level. And then what happens is at 4, upgrade 8, and upgrade 12, the threshold's 3 times, right, on every third, it will giga buff 1 affix roll. I think they call it masterworking. Essentially, that 1 affix that will get picked at random by the affixes on the item will get a massive 20% buff to it, right? And it can happen on the 4th, 8th, and 12th, and the same affix can get picked all 3 times. So it's possible on cooldown reduction that it gets every big masterwork buff, and by the end of it, that cooldown reduction affix roll is huge, making this piece potentially a build enabler for cooldown build around ultimate, whatever like that. It should add some interesting to it, right? And it really helps the fact that, again, base loot is going to be very straightforward. That drops on the ground, very easy to read, very easy to sift through. But once you pick it up, you then will put your own effort and time to customizing it to be the piece you actually were looking for. And this is a smart way of doing it for Diablo, I think. As a player, I would rather have a ton of interesting stuff on the ground itself, a ton of interesting stuff in the affixes, and I can use the loot filter to filter through that. But PoE and Last Epoch already do that so wonderfully. I kind of like the idea of loot being more straightforward and easy to digest, and I customize it more easily in a game like this doing the content, right? So anyways, the pit is how you will get the currency to Mastercraft. You will push harder and harder and harder. On top of that, they're adding actual Uber bosses now to the game. Basically, every ladder boss, right? Zur, the Gregory guy, Daryl will have a level 200 version of them. I think they called it Infested. And you will summon these bosses from doing the pit. Doing these bosses, they will drop much more loot than the normal version of that boss. And the first time you kill it will drop an iridescent shard, which is the stuff used to craft Ubers. So basically, we're going to be able to craft a guaranteed Uber every season now by going through this boss ladder and doing this high level stuff. And that's pretty exciting. On top of that, uniques will still have all 4 affix rules. And they can also grid roll, and they can also masterwork. So uniques have a little more interesting stuff going on. There's some general playing stuff they talked about, like for example, damage reduction is going to be much more rarer, harder to find. But generally speaking, class balance is going to change massively, and how things work are going to change massively, but it's hard to tell if it's going to be an overall buff, overall nerf. The game is changing massively. Old Diablo 4 is dead. The Diablo 4 that should have launched is here. Whether it ends up being a good balance there or not, we'll have to see. Based on how well the season 2 changes went with vulnerability and that stuff, they did a good enough job. I think it will be good enough, but we'll test it all out in a PTR coming next week here, April 2nd. I guess it's a week and a half now, and that will last for a week for us to play with, and then a month after that will be the season. They delayed the season a little bit so they can take the feedback from it. So I think by the time the season actually comes out, it will be figured out. Hopefully it's good at the PTR launch. We'll see. On top of all that, we're still going to get seasonal mechanics. We don't know that stuff yet. And we're also getting a new boss, Endero. Yeah, and that boss is in the game finally. I get my brain's just farting right now. That boss is in the game finally, and that will be fun to kill. Also, that boss will be essentially a equivalent to Duriel. Right now you get Duriel by fighting Gregory from Helltides, and you get him from killing Vershawn. Right? Yeah. Right now, you killed Duriel. It's been a bit lost deep. I take my time. You kill Duriel by killing Vershawn, and you kill Vershawn by killing Word Events, and you get Gregory Mats from doing Helltide. So they're adding Andro, which is from the other 2 bosses, right? Ice Beast from Nightmare Dungeons, and Zur from Word Events and Word Bosses. Those 2 bosses will drop 7 mats that can go to Andro, and Andro will be adjacent to Duriel. Nova boss Uber drops in general. Just more ways of farming Ubers, more interesting varied activities, which is good. Helltides also getting huge quality of life. Helltides will finally have the open world event system that we're seeing from the Blood Harvest that we're seeing from season 3 Central stuff, where it's very dynamic. Things are spawning on you. There's many bosses happening. There's a threat system now. You'll be able to summon a ward boss if you want to fight together. Helltides will also be taking place in World Tier 1 and 2 now. And on top of all that, leveling will be much easier because they'll buff the XP gains from World Tier 2 and World Tier 3 and World Tier 4. Finally pushing the meta towards playing World Tier 2 off the bat as fast as you can, because that will be very efficient XP wise. I think it's a banger patch. Yes, it's all things that should have been in the game at start. Yeah, it's all stuff that just should have been happening. I we'll still be excited about it. I'm still very happy they're working so hard, working so fast to get the game in a much better state. Again, state they should have been, but these updates that were free at least, I was fully expecting these updates to come during expansions that we would pay for. But these updates that are massively changing the game, the ward boss, the boss ladder system, the Uber crafting, the itemization changes, the boss ladder in general, the new pit system, the new Uber boss system, all these things I was expecting to take for a year or two. I was expecting expansions to be doing this stuff. So it's great. It's great to see. I think it's very exciting. It's fantastic. If the season mechanic on top of all this is great, this will easily be the best season in Diablo, which isn't, a hard thing to say yet, but it will be a good season. It will actually be a good RPG game season if it ends up having a cool season mechanic on top of all this. Well, let me know in the comments what you think. Was this enough for you to come back? Are you going to play no matter what? Is this something that interests you? What would they have to do to get you come back if not this? Let me know.